Hi Raptor fans! My name is Teresa and I work here at the Montana Raptor Conservation Center in Bozeman, Montana. Thank you so much for watching this video. This is our last installment of the 2020 Summer Education Series. Today we are going to be talking about migration, which is an extremely exciting subject to talk about, especially when you're talking about birds and raptors. So migration is a pretty amazing feat that many animals and raptors will do every single fall. A lot of times they will be migrating south, likely due to food availability, especially raptors like Watson here that might be eating insects. It's going to be a lot less available in the winter months, especially up here in Montana. So many Montana raptors will migrate south for the winter time, especially as the snow hits and food is not available for these birds. So many raptors will migrate more likely based on food than actually based on the cold. Now there are a few other raptor species that definitely would have a hard time with the cold, and so they will have to migrate south based on not having enough coverage over their bare skin. But birds like Watson here, who is an American kestrel, can survive in kind of cooler areas, but they also rely a lot of times on insects and rodents and small birds. But as the insects start to dwindle in the wintertime, they might have to head down south. Now, a pretty amazing thing about kestrels is that they actually do what's called a leapfrog migration. So when you were a kid and you played this game where someone, like your sibling, sat on the ground and you hopped over them, that was like the leapfrog game. Kestrels will do this, but with migration. So if kestrels like Watson here are migrating in the fall, they will go down south to kind of like the middle part of the US, and oftentimes there will be kestrels there that are not migrating. There's enough food for them to stay there. So when the kestrels from Montana make it down there, there's already far too many kestrels for them to have enough food. So then they will leapfrog or pass those other populations of kestrels and continue going south. So sometimes Montana kestrels will actually migrate all the way down to Central America. So behind me I have a map of a lot of raptors in Montana and where they will be heading for the winter time. So you can see kestrels starting here. They're kind of this light blue color with the red line around it, and they might go all the way down to Central America. But migration tendencies can actually change almost every single year, depending especially on the climate and the weather. So as our climate changes, our birds are going to actually see a change in their migration. And actually here in Bozeman, we are lucky enough to be right next to the Rockies, and our mountain range right here next to Bozeman is the Bridger mountain range. And there's actually so many raptors migrating over the mountains here that we have a group of people that will sit up on top of the mountains every single day during September, October, and I believe part of November. And they will count the different raptors that are flying over the ridge. Ooh. And try to get an accurate count of how many raptors are flying through here. And that is a pretty amazing thing that they do, because it takes a lot of dedication. They have to hike up there every single morning before sunrise, and they stay up there all day, and then they hike back down after sunset. And that is a lot of time sitting, staring at the sky through binoculars. So we're pretty lucky to have the group of individuals that go up there every single year. Another important part of these individuals that are counting up there is we have a huge population of golden eagles migrating over the bridges. So they're paying attention to especially the golden eagle population, because there are often many of them migrating through this area. But they will also see kestrels occasionally. Even though these are some little birds, they still do use updrafts coming off of the mountains to kind of ease their path. So those updrafts will help them, bless you, get a nice lift as they're migrating, which will allow them to hopefully migrate with very little amount of energy usage. So these birds are often going to be migrating through here, and we might even see a few hang on for kind of later into the winter, sometimes especially in areas that don't have a lot of snow. These birds might still be able to find a lot of rodents and birds to help even out their food for the winter time. In the springtime, we have a lot of kestrels coming back up here to Bozeman, and They often are going to be found nesting in holes in trees, or maybe the sides of buildings if there's holes, or in cliffside. And then they are often probably going to migrate back up here in order to have more food availability. So they make the really big trek back up here to get good mating grounds. And then once they have raised their young, they'll kind of prepare for migration and leave again in the fall time. Now these birds are pretty interesting. It seems like the females actually migrate first, and then they kind of get prime pick of where they would like to live in the fall and winter time in the southern areas. So females are actually more often found near nice open fields, grassy areas, and then the males will actually tend to migrate a little bit later in the fall and arrive down south a little bit later, so they don't get to pick quite as nice of an area as the females have. So you actually see a lot of male kestrels living near forested areas, bless you, which is a little bit harder for them to find food in those areas. So it's nice of them to let the females have the really nice hunting spots. But these birds are going to be often found on telephone wires on the side of the road, and also perched on telephone poles. Starting kind of September and October, you're going to be seeing a lot of kestrels and other raptors migrating, so keep an eye out for a big amount of birds on the side of the road as they make their travels down south. Watson here is an amazing education ambassador, and we've had him for about 7 years now, and he's doing that little kestrel head bob. That's actually a good way to tell you're looking at a kestrel when they do that. You see a little bird doing that little head bob. You can also see those black lines underneath his eyes. Those are called malar stripes, and that's another good way to tell you're looking at a kestrel or a falcon, is falcons often have those black lines underneath their eyes. But these are some of the amazing birds we have in Montana that will migrate south for the winter and come back up in the springtime. If you have any question about Watson, who's very focused, any question about Watson, kestrels, or kestrel migration, please put them in the comments below. Okay, everybody, this here is Chaco, and he is our Swainsons Hawk. A lot of people actually haven't even heard of Swainsons Hawks before. They're a little bit smaller than the red-tailed hawk, which is one of the most common raptors that you can find here in North America. We do have them here in Montana, but they actually just come up here to breed and have their babies, raise their babies, and then they migrate a very long ways. These birds will go from Montana all the way down to the southern tip of Argentina. They have over 6,000 miles that they have to travel one way. Now these birds will actually migrate the whole length of time in just about a month and a half. So they have a lot of ground to cover relatively quickly. Now these birds here in Montana, especially when they're raising their young, will eat a lot of rodents. We have a lot of ground squirrels, voles, and mice for them to feed their young. But when they're migrating, they actually mostly feast on insects, especially grasshoppers. And that's actually how they get their name, the grasshopper hawk. These birds are so good at eating grasshoppers, they can eat about 100 in just one sitting. They're also really, really helpful to have for our environment. They're often referred to as the farmer's friend because them eating insects is going to be extremely helpful to farmers. It's going to give them a natural insecticide so that farmers don't have to use as many chemicals on their crops, and will hopefully help them out so that they can get their crops nice and healthy without lots of insects and rodents eating them. Swainsons hawks are so good at eating grasshoppers and mice in farm fields, they will actually perch on top of tractors or on top of hay bales and sit and wait for the farmers to plow their fields, and then it'll reveal all the insects and rodents for them to eat, and then they'll run around on the ground and grab their fill. Now these birds can be easily identified with that white patch underneath their chin that you can see on Chaco, also that nice brown bib that you can see on his chest. And they don't have a brick red tail like the red-tailed hawks do typically, so you can see he's got a nice gray striped one. And so those are some good ways to tell you're looking at a Swainsons hawk. Now you can also, hi, thank you. Some of them are a little bit lighter than Chaco. He actually kind of has, ooh, Oops, very nice. Kind of a rufous belly, whereas the light morph Swainsons Hawks actually have a very white belly and have a very defined brown bib. And then the dark morph Swainsons Hawks actually don't have that white beard and don't have a very dark, or they have a dark chest, so the bib doesn't stick out very much. So they can be kind of hard to tell from red-tailed hawks. One of the suggestions that I often make for identifying these birds is to listen to their call versus a red-tailed hawk call, because oftentimes when they're soaring around, they will do a territorial call or call to their mate, and so that's a really good way to tell when you're around a Swainsons hawk. Now these birds actually highly rely on warm pockets of air that rise into the sky during the daytime. They're called thermals. And Swainsons hawks are often going to be migrating through open fields rather than along mountain ranges or coastal regions using those updrafts off the ocean or the mountains. So most of the time we actually don't see too many Swainsons hawks migrating near the bridgers, so they often don't get calculated in our count. But we do have many Swainsons hawks that live here in the spring and summertime. And when they're migrating, they end up going down to through Central America all the way down to the southernmost part of South America and Argentina. And you can see that the United States kind of goes into a funnel shape. And so they actually are going to be migrating through a very small area. And so a really special time during migration in the fall is when there's thousands and thousands of Swainsons hawks in just a small area down in New Mexico and Central America. So it's a pretty amazing sight to see. There's so many of them that they oftentimes will black out the sky for a little bit as they migrate through. These birds are really important to have for our environment to keep our rodent and insect populations down. So we're really lucky to have them up here in Montana for our spring and summertime. A really great way to help out these birds is to set up raptor poles in your yard or in an area, nice big open field where you are allowed to set up a nice big tall pole, because oftentimes when they're migrating or when they're hunting, they're what's called perch and pounce hunters. So they sit somewhere very high and wait for their prey to come near them. So a lot of times they'll perch on top of those really tall poles to look for their food. And if you have lots of insects and rodents in your area and want to take care of them, then putting up a big raptor pole will help attract these birds to that location to hunt. Chaco is an amazing education ambassador. If you have any questions about him, please put them in the comments below. Here's our last raptor for the video. This here is Pilgrim, and she is our turkey vulture. Turkey vultures are definitely big migrators. They will often live here only for the spring and summer as well. You can see she's got that bald head and those bare feet, so she would definitely be really chilly in our Montana winters. So we see turkey vultures for such a short period of time here that a lot of people don't even realize that we have turkey vultures in this part of Montana. A lot of times too, it can be easy to get them confused with golden eagles or bald eagles when they're flying. One thing that might help you is when Pilgrim's out here, you might notice that the under part of her wings, she actually kind of has like a light white kind of grayish window on her primary and secondary feathers. So when they're soaring, that's a really good way to tell you're looking at a turkey vulture. Also, their wings will typically kind of go up in a V shape, and so that will give you a good idea as well. And turkey vultures highly rely on those thermals that we were talking about with Chaco earlier. Those warm pockets of air will rise as the ground heats up in the morning time, and they'll kind of go in a circular motion in the air. So a lot of times when people see turkey vultures, they see them circling over up high in the sky. So a lot of people will think that's because they are looking for their prey, or they're waiting for their prey to die if they're circling above a live animal. But turkey vultures actually are often utilizing those thermals, which is what causes that circular motion in their flight. Now they will use thermals while they fly, but they'll also use those updrafts off of mountain ranges and the ocean. And that will allow them to soar for up to 6 hours without having to flap their wings once. So they have almost a 6-foot wingspan with very stiff feathers, and all those combined with the updrafts and the thermals give them an excellent tool to migrate without using a lot of energy. Now vultures, of course, are known for eating dead things, and you can see that bald head is going to be very helpful for Pilgrim to keep her nice and clean while she is eating those dead things. If she gets anything on her bare head, all she has to do is hang out in the sun and bake off any of that bacteria that she might find. Now Pilgrim is demonstrating a little bit of why they have such nice flat feet too. That's going to give her really, really good leverage to use her sharp beak to rip at her food. Now she's giving you guys a really good show of the back of her wing. All right, Pilgrim, there we go. Now that you can see her face a little bit better, you can see she has a hole right through her face, and those are her nostrils, or for a bird's case, those are her nares, and that allows her to smell really, really well. So actually a turkey vulture can smell a rotting carcass from a mile away. So these birds will often migrate from Montana all the way down to the southern parts of Central America, where they live in much warmer climates for the winter. If you have any questions about Pilgrim or about turkey vultures, please place them in the comments below. We want to thank you so much for watching our video, and have a great beginning of the school year. See ya!